This episode was produced using AI-generated voices and scripting. $500 million in annual recurring revenue doesn't buy you a moat. It buys you a target.
And that's the part that everyone celebrating this number seems to forget. Like, congrats, you've gotten big enough that the actual monster now has to look at
Okay, so Perplexity, $500 million in ARR. The narrative is AI search is eating Google alive. I've seen this movie before, Soren. Every 18 months, someone's eating Google alive.
you. Right, DuckDuckGo was eating Google alive. Bing with ChatGPT was eating Google alive. Neva was eating Google alive. And then Neva literally shut down. So yeah, there's a pattern here. But I actually think this time is genuinely different. And not for the reason the headlines suggest.
Why?
Because Perplexity isn't winning on search quality. They're winning on form factor. The answer box, the citations, the follow-up questions. It's not that the results are better than Google's. Half the time they're worse. It's that the experience of using it feels different enough that people are willing to pay for it. That's a consumer behavior shift, not a technology shift.
Okay, but hang on. 500 million sounds enormous, but Google's ad revenue last year was like 260 billion. So Perplexity is capturing, what, 0.2% of that?
Less. And that's why the threat framing is kind of ridiculous at this scale. But ARR growth rate matters more than absolute number here. They were at like 100 million a year ago. Going 5x in a year, that trajectory is the thing that makes the CFO nervous, not the number itself.
Does it, though? Does it actually make Google's CFO nervous? Because Google could light $500 million on fire every quarter, and it wouldn't show up in their earnings call.
That's not what's happening. The nervousness isn't about the revenue Perplexity is taking from Google. It's about the revenue Perplexity proves doesn't need to flow through Google in the first place. Every query that goes to Perplexity is a query that never generates an ad impression. And nobody's saying this. The real threat isn't substitution, it's query evaporation. Those searches just vanish from Google's ecosystem entirely.
Query evaporation. That's a good phrase. I'm gonna pretend you didn't rehearse that.
I absolutely rehearsed.
But here's what bugs me about the whole Perplexity story. Who's actually paying? Like, is this real consumer demand? Or is this a bunch of tech early adopters with annual subscriptions they forgot to cancel?
Okay, so some of it is consumer subscriptions, the $20 a month pro plan. But the actually interesting growth is enterprise. They launched Perplexity Enterprise Pro. Companies are buying it for their teams as a research tool. And that's a completely different competitive vector. That's not competing with Google search. That's competing with like internal knowledge management, maybe even Glean or Notion AI.
Which, honestly, that makes the Google threat narrative even weaker. If enterprise is the growth engine, this isn't about search disruption at all.
Exactly. And I think that's the contrarian read that nobody wants to say out loud because it makes the story less exciting. Perplexity's fastest path to real scale probably isn't replacing Google for the average person searching for pizza near me. It's becoming the default research interface for knowledge workers, and that's a huge market. But it's not the Google killer market.
So the $500 million Google killer is actually a really good enterprise SaaS tool?
I mean, kind of, and that's fine. That's a great business. But the framing matters because investors value them at $9 billion on the back of the Google disruption narrative. If the real story is enterprise search and research tooling, the concept changes completely. You're not the next Google. You're the next, I don't know, Elastic with a chatbot.
Elastic with a chatbot is going on a t-shirt.
Please don't.
Okay, different angle. Let's say I'm wrong and the consumer side is real. Let's take the threat seriously. Google has AI overviews now. They're doing the same answer box thing Perplexity does, but on top of the world's biggest search index with the world's biggest ad machine behind it. How does Perplexity survive that?
This is the existential question, and Perplexity's answer is basically Google can't fully commit to this because every AI overview that actually answers the question is a reason not to click a link. And every link not clicked is ad revenue destroyed. Google is playing defense with one hand tied behind its back. Perplexity doesn't have that conflict.
The innovator's dilemma thing.
Everyone loves invoking Clayton Christensen like a magic spell. But honestly, it applies here more than most places people use it. Google literally cannot give you the best possible AI answer because their business model punishes them for doing it. They need you to still click links. Perplexity's model is subscriptions. They want you to get the answer and stop searching.
But Google's already doing it. AI overviews are on like a billion queries now. They clearly decided to take the hit.
Have they, though? Look at the actual implementation. AI overviews still have ads above them, ads below them, and the overview itself is often deliberately vague enough to encourage a click through. No, actually, it's the opposite of committing. It's hedging. They're trying to look like they're innovating while preserving the click through funnel, and users can feel that.
That's fair. The AI overviews are kind of uncanny valley. Not helpful enough to be the answer, not absent enough to be ignored.
Right. And that middle ground is exactly where a focused competitor thrives. You don't beat the incumbent by being slightly better. You beat them by being categorically different in a way they can't copy without destroying themselves.
Okay, so who does Perplexity's 500 million actually hurt? If it's not meaningfully denting Google yet, whose lunch are they eating right now, today?
Publishers. And this is the part that gets me genuinely irritated. Perplexity's product fundamentally works by scraping, summarizing, and repackaging content from news outlets, research papers, blogs, and then putting a little citation link at the bottom that almost nobody clicks. They built a $500 million business on other people's content.
Wait, seriously? You're the one usually defending the new thing. Now you sound like a newspaper editor in 2009.
I know how it sounds, but there's a real difference between Google, which at least sends traffic to the source, and Perplexity, which synthesizes the source into an answer that eliminates the need to visit it. The value extraction is more complete, and the actual number is Forbes did an analysis. Something like less than 1% of Perplexity citations result in a click through to the source.
1%.
Less than. So when we talk about who's threatened, yeah, Google's revenue isn't moving. But The Verge's traffic, Wirecutter's traffic, random bloggers who depend on search referrals, those are the casualties right now. And Perplexity's response to this has been basically, we'll do revenue sharing eventually. Eventually.
That's the whole game right there. They're building the business first and promising to share later. Where have I heard that before?
Every platform ever. And by the time they share, the leverage has completely shifted. The publisher needs Perplexity more than Perplexity needs the publisher.
So the Google killer is actually a publisher killer first. That's a much darker story than the raw disruption thing.
It is, and it connects to a bigger structural problem with all AI search products. They devalue the creation of original information while profiting from its existence. At some point, if nobody's funding journalism or research because the economic model collapsed, what exactly is the AI summarizing? Itself?
The Ouroboros problem.
Exactly. And that's not a 5-year problem. That's a now problem. We're already seeing newsrooms cut because of traffic declines from AI generated answers.
Okay, let me push back on your pushback because I think you're being too romantic about the old model. Publishers were already getting destroyed by Google's featured snippets and knowledge panels. Perplexity didn't invent the answer without clicking thing. Google did.
True, but Google at least maintained the fiction of the blue link. The 10 results on a page. The click-through was degraded, but it still existed. AI search doesn't degrade it, it eliminates it. That's a qualitative difference, not quantitative.
Huh. I'll give you that.
But, and I want to be fair, Perplexity is also doing something publishers never figured out how to do for themselves, which is make information actually accessible and usable. Go try to find a straightforward answer on most news sites. You'll scroll through 18 paragraphs of context, 4 ads, a newsletter pop-up, and a cookie banner before you get to the thing you wanted. Perplexity fixed the user experience. It just didn't fix the economics.
That's the tension, isn't it? The product is genuinely better for users. The business model is genuinely worse for the information ecosystem. Both things are true.
Both things are true.
Let me bring up something else. Perplexity just started rolling out ads. They're doing sponsored follow-up questions, brand placements, and answers. So the subscription purity play, that's already over. They're building an ad business.
And look, that's the thing that should make everyone reassess the narrative. The whole pitch was, we're the anti-Google. We don't serve ads, we serve you. And now, at 500 million ARR, they've already decided subscriptions aren't enough. They need advertising revenue, which means they're going to end up with the exact same incentive misalignment they're supposedly disrupting Google for having.
You said 10 minutes ago that Google can't fully commit to great AI answers because ads conflict with helpfulness. Doesn't Perplexity now have that same problem?
I Yeah, yes. It's early and the ads are pretty subtle right now, but the direction is clear. The logic is identical. If your revenue comes from brands paying to be in the answer starts bending toward the brand. That's just gravity.
So the Google killer becomes Google.
Slowly, reluctantly, but probably inevitably. And this is why I'm actually more bearish on Perplexity long term than most people, even though the short term numbers are impressive. The business model convergence is coming. You either stay subscriptions only and cap your growth, or you add ads and become the thing you're replacing.
Okay, but hang on. Is there a third option? What about the enterprise play you mentioned earlier? Just go full B2B and avoid the whole consumer ad trap.
That would be the smart move. But the valuation doesn't support it. At $9 billion, investors are pricing in consumer search disruption, not enterprise SaaS multiples. If Aravind Srinivas goes to his board and says, actually, we're pivoting to enterprise, that valuation collapses overnight. So they're trapped in the narrative, even if the narrative is wrong.
That's bleak.
It's realistic. The fundraising story constrains the business strategy. They raised on the promise of being the Google alternative, and now they have to perform that role whether or not it's the best business.
This keeps happening in AI. The fundraise determines the product roadmap instead of the other way around.
Because the multiples are so insane right now that founders optimize for the narrative that maximizes valuation, and then they're stuck executing against it. It's like you told everyone you're building a rocket ship, and now you can't just build a really good airplane, even though the airplane is what the market actually needs.
Let's talk about what Google's actually doing in response. Not just AI overviews, their whole counter strategy.
So there's multiple layers. There's AI overviews for consumers. There's Gemini getting integrated into Workspace for the enterprise angle. But the actually scary Google move, and nobody's saying this, is on the infrastructure side. Google controls the models, the cloud, the TPUs, the data. Perplexity runs on what? A mix of their own fine-tuned models plus API calls to other people's models, running on someone else's cloud. The cost structure is completely different.
Meaning Google can just outspend them into the ground.
Not just outspend, subsidize. Google can make AI search a free feature of Chrome, Android, Gmail, every surface they already own. Perplexity has to convince people to open a new app or go to a new website. Google just has to add a toggle. The distribution advantage is monstrous.
That's the same argument people made about Microsoft and Bing. Bing is pre-installed on every Windows machine, and it still doesn't matter.
Fair point, but Bing was never actually better at the core task. If Google's AI integration actually delivers better answers, and they have the best models, the most data, and the most context about what you actually want, then distribution plus quality is a kill shot. Bing had distribution, but not quality.
So your actual take is Perplexity's impressive, the growth is real, but they're in a window that's closing?
I think they have maybe 18 months where the window is open, where Google's internal politics and ad revenue protection create enough hesitation that Perplexity can build habits and lock in users. After that, Google either fully commits to AI native search or, and this is the dark option, they just acquire Perplexity.
The acqui-hire. Classic.
9 billion seems expensive, but Google paid 12 billion for Motorola, and that was just for patents. If Perplexity actually has 50 million monthly actives who've switched their default search behavior, that's worth way more than 9 billion to Google.
Buy the disruptor, absorb the team, shut down the product. Tale as old as time.
Or keep it running as a subsidiary, like YouTube. But either way, the independent Perplexity is Google killer narrative probably has an expiration date. And the 500 million ARR number is both the proof that they've built something real and the flare that draws the predator.
You said earlier that the 500 million buys you a target, not a moat. That's exactly what you're describing now.
Yeah, it's the paradox of product market fit in a space where the incumbent has infinite resources. Being too successful too fast is actually dangerous if you don't have a structural advantage the incumbent can't replicate.
What would that structural advantage look like? What could Perplexity do that Google genuinely can't?
Build a brand that means trust. That's it. If Perplexity becomes the brand people trust for unbiased ad-free answers, even though they're adding ads, even though that's already eroding, trust is hard to copy. Google's brand is convenience. If Perplexity owns trust, that's durable. But like I said, they're already compromised on it.
So they're burning their one real advantage to chase the growth the investors demand.
That's the pattern, yeah?
All right, let me see if I can land this. 500 million is real. The growth is real. AI search is genuinely changing user behavior. But Perplexity is trapped between a business model that converges with Google's, an investor narrative that constrains their strategy, and a closing window before the incumbent fully wakes up. And the actual casualties so far aren't Google's revenue. They're
Publishers, small creators, the people who make the information that makes the product work.
right. Who does that actually help in the end?
User, for now, genuinely. The product is good, people like using it. Whether that holds when the ads creep in and the content ecosystem degrades, I honestly don't know. But right now, today, it's a better experience for a lot of queries. I just don't think better experience is enough when you're playing in Google's backyard.
The $500 million question.
Literally.
That's the show.